For our Monday panel by the newly elected Labor MP for the Brisbane seat of Lily, Anika Wells. Welcome to you.
Good to be with you.
And the Liberal MP for Mackellar on Sydney's Northern Beaches, Jason Falinski. Welcome.
Thanks, Matt.
Jason Falinski, if I could start with you. There is a lot of criticism of the government for introducing this legislation, simply picking up on the fact that there has been high-profile misconduct by people like John Setka and the Victorian branch of the CFMMEU, as opposed to there actually being merit to this legislation to change governance rules within the union movement. Isn't this just straight out of the coalition playbook to have a crack at the unions?
Well, firstly, can I say how impressed I am that you got the double M in the CFMMEU? It's something I struggle with every day. The second thing is, it is unfortunate that this has become unions versus the coalition, because it's not meant to be that. What it's meant to be is all registered organisations, employee and employer organisations, and making sure that they are properly governed, that members aren't getting ripped off, and that it relies on the Royal Commission findings from 2015. 2015, that essentially said, look, these are some of the things that are going on in registered organisations. It would be sensible for whatever government of the day to ban them. This is what we've done in financial services. It's what we're going to be doing increasingly in financial services. It's sensible that we probably do it with registered organisations as well.
Anika Wells, there is, I guess, some discussion about whether corruption or misconduct at the very least is a problem within the union movement. You do only have to look at John Setka and the Victorian CFMMEU and notice that there is a lot of attention being put on the union movement for all the wrong reasons. What is the concern about trying to strengthen those rules and at least in some ways improve it in the public perspective, improve the regime in the public's view?
Sure. Well, these laws are fundamentally unfair. There are no laws like this that apply to the banks or to businesses or to politicians. And I'm glad that Jason brought up the Royal Commission into unions, because it makes me think of the other Royal Commission we had around about the same time, which was the Royal Commission into the banks, where that was the Royal Commission which unveiled systemic ripping off and rorts of working Australians. And yet, here we are in the fresh days of the third term of the government, and they've come galloping into the chamber to introduce laws about unions rather than doing anything to legislate the recommendations of the Banking Royal Commission. I just think the priorities are wrong. Is
the Labor Party open to attacks on this issue because it is so reliant on the union movement for money, to prop it up financially?
We're not supporting the legislation because it's unfair, and I'll tell you why. The average Australian union member is a woman in her 50s working in the public sector, probably in teaching or nursing or in administration. And this legislation isn't designed to look after people like her, and she has a right to representation, and she has a right to choose who represents her. And this bill is about going after the unions and going after the unions who are the government's political enemies, and not looking after the average union worker.
So, Matt, can I say to that? That's absolutely, thank you. Firstly, I think the Trade Union Royal Commission reported in 2015, it might have been 2014. So there is 5 years difference between that and the Banking Royal Commission that reported in 2019. Secondly, we have already brought and already passed a truckload of legislation around the recommendations of the Financial Service Royal Commission. But you tell me where in the financial service sector you would be able to do what the ETU has done with the Protect Insurance racket, where they have simply transferred $32 million worth of members' money out of that insurance fund into themselves. So I think Anika and I are on a unity ticket here. We are definitely trying to help and protect the average
Parliament House going off there.
That's not a division.
That's not cool, is it?
Not a division. I don't think that's all right.
That is the average union member who is a woman in her 50s. I mean, I'm sure Anika wants to make sure that they are getting properly represented and they're not getting ripped off, whether it's a bank or whether it's a trade union or whether it's an employers association. And I can't imagine that there's anyone in this place who would be against that, unless, of course, it's because they happen to donate a lot of money to your political party.
You picked up on the Protect Insurance situation there. What is wrong with unions having funds that will provide for training for their members, or having funds that will provide for other means, such as, you know, insurance should they be injured?
Yeah, for their entitlements and things like that. Nothing except the rorts. So members have been paying money into this insurance fund, and then the ETU took that money out without any explanation other than it was for sponsorship. As Christian Porter pointed out to the House of Representatives, the largest sponsorship deal in history to date was $31 million for Cristiano Ronaldo. The biggest one now is a $32 million sponsorship deal the ETU struck with itself using members' money in that insurance fund. Now, insurance companies like Insurance Australia Group or QBE, or Suncorp, if they were to do that, APRA would sack the board and probably send many of the directors to jail for it. Now, at the moment, the laws that we have in Australia allow union leaders to do that without any consequences. And let me make this clear, it's not just union leaders. If an employer organisation did that too, there is no law stopping them from doing that.
Anika Wells, right of reply there?
Well, I think I just make the point that we hear these specific examples from the government about why we have to act. And I also pick up what you said about this being something that happened in 2015. So why now, in July 2019, is it suddenly so urgent? But I think the point I'd make specifically in my right of reply is that this legislation isn't retrospective. So it's not going to capture John Secker or the like of the examples that they're bringing it up. So really, what's the point?
Well, to that, if I may.
Very briefly.
I would say we have been trying to do this for 5 years. I know that you haven't been here for very long, and that sounds patronising, and I haven't been here very long either. But this has been trying to be done for 5 years. So we have come back to this because it's becoming urgent, and just because it happened in the past is no excuse for it to continue into the future, which I'm sure you agree with.
As time is quickly escaping from us, I do want to pick up on the other issue that is in Parliament at the moment, and that is New Start. We heard Barnaby Joyce ramping up his comments about the fact that people who are on New Start are doing it tough. Do you think that Labor's argument with regards to reviewing New Start would be stronger if you actually put a figure on how much it should be increased by? Isn't your argument at the moment a bit hollow because you're just saying let's have a review and kicking it out into the long grass?
Well, the reason we asked for a review into the adequacy of New Start is because we wanted it to be assessed by the relevant bodies in the Parliament, in the committees, in the Parliamentary Budget Office, places like that, because it needs to be considered against other payments in the welfare system as well. We asked for a review into the adequacy of all of those payments. So I think the point being is that the only way we are getting a raise to New Start this term is by government legislation. And at the moment, we are so far from getting that through. We've got to focus on just building the momentum. You know, we welcome Barnaby Joyce aboard the wagon. We welcome all fellow travellers to this cause. But when you've got ACOS and the BCA and the Reserve Bank and, you know, to invoke the holiest of liberal holies, former Prime Minister John Howard, all arguing for a raise to the rate, then, we're looking to the government to act.
Very briefly, Jason Falinski, will you be hitching yourself to that wagon?
Well, firstly, Anika's reminded me I didn't wish John Howard happy birthday, so let me do that, thank you. Look, the government has a lot of empathy for people who are unemployed. We are trying to get, and we understand how difficult it must be for people in this situation. We've spent a lot of taxpayers' money trying to create pathways for people into work. I know the Labor Party agrees with this. That is the best solution. That is the best way. That is the best form of welfare, and that's what we're trying to achieve.
Well, Jason Falinski, Anika Wells, we must let you depart our studio to get to the